Yeah, we have lots for you to see because if you haven't made it to the gallery, there's 83 pieces. And we're also going to share the installation and the opening. So sit back and relax. Let's see. Let Susan get set up. Hey. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 440 Gallery Artist Talk. Today, we're talking about the Small Work Show, which was curated by Grace Freedman. The show is up through Friday, January 5th. And I just want to mention that the last day for holiday shopping, since art does make the perfect gift, and small works can even fit in a stocking, is Friday the 23rd. And on Friday, the gallery is open from 12 to 6. So I also want to say that if you haven't seen it in person and you're in the area, seeing it in person really makes a huge difference. And but today we will get to see each piece by itself.
Wow.
It's always interesting to see the relationships that are created and also the detail and texture in each piece. But let's introduce our curator. Grace Freedman is the juror for the show. She's thoughtfully curated a collection of 83 works chosen from nearly 575 artists.
Wow.
The artworks range from traditional painting and sculpture to photography and digital works, each measuring no more than 12 inches in every dimension. This is our 19th annual Small Work Show, and we're pleased to note the recipients of our awards. So the Jim Manuel Memorial Award, which was selected by the gallery members, goes to Lynn Cole. The Juror's Choice Award, which is chosen by Grace, goes to Amy Morken, and who we're speaking with today. And the People's Choice Award is still to be determined. So when you go to the gallery, make your choice and we'll see who gets it. And yes, in addition to talking to Grace, we'll be speaking with Amy Morken, Clare Burson, and Jocelyn Benford, representing for our 83 artists. So thank you very much for showing up and being our spokespeople. So we're just taking a look at the installation. So Grace, if you have any comments about the installation, feel free.
Yeah, well, I'll just say that while I was the sole juror, I worked with the 440 team on the installation. And it really came together beautifully, I thought. They have so much experience. They had started grouping works together. I happened to come in. Robin Roy was part of the group, Karen, Joanne AC, and is it Peter?
Fred Bentheim.
Sorry, Fred Bentheim.
Mm-hmm.
Was part of that group, and I really enjoyed collaborating with them on the actual installation. As you can imagine, it's a challenge to put their 83 works together in a space, but I think we were able to give a lot of space to each of them, and I thought it really pulled together well. And then the opening reception, as you can see from some of these photos, it was very well received. There were tons and tons of people there. And I think that just shows both the interest in this type of work, that people were coming out and supporting their friends, and also just that 440 is like a well-loved local gallery that people come out for, and they anticipated this show. So it was, I heard stories of people peeking in the windows and wanting to come in for the opening. So it was really fun to be there at the opening and kind of experience that excitement around all the artists and the small works. So it's cool to have these photos. Spilling out onto the sidewalk.
Yeah, what a beautiful event.
but it really is worthwhile to see the show in person if you haven't already. But I do think in a moment we're going to be going through each of the pieces one by one.
Yes, and as we get to that, I just want to remind everybody that I'm going to be asking questions of each of Grace and Amy and Claire and Jocelyn. And if questions occur to you, please write them in the chat. If you could stay muted while they're talking, that would be great. And then if you want, I will read the questions in the chat, or you can just unmute and ask your questions yourself towards the end. So I'm going to talk to Grace while we look at the images, since there's so many. Grace, if you want Susan to slow down or land on one, just feel free to say so.
Okay.
All right. So congratulations, Grace. You have curated a wonderful show. This was no small task, given the number of entries and the range of materials, subject matter, and styles. My first question is, how do you see your job as a curator? What went into your selections?
Well, I'll have to be honest. When I signed up to be the juror, I really had no idea how many artists would be applying. And as you said, I think it was 575, something like that. And then because artists had multiple images, there were thousands of images that I reviewed. And so that was an interesting and exciting opportunity, a challenge, but I really learned a lot. And one of the things, couple of things going into the jury process, because I know it's so difficult for artists to share their work. It's their personal, it's very personal. I really wanted to I wanted to honor every entry, even though there were so many, and set up a process by which I could really give a consideration to every single image. So I did sort of set up a big screen, and I spent many minutes on each piece before going through the process. So I tried to systematically, and it was pretty blind. Some people's work I obviously recognize, but I just wanted to see what kind of reaction curation is very personal. I wanted to see what kind of personal reaction I had got from the images. Obviously, judging sort of the high quality of the work, I was thrilled at the high quality of all the entries. And then I went through a series of rounds to get to the number, the optimal number. Unfortunately, I did have to do some culling at the end. I lost some that I kind of loved. But at the end of the day, I did really connect to all the pieces that I chose. And I'm very proud of the show that we put together. The second thing I wanted to say is I really went in with the goal of having a lot of different materials and a lot of different styles of work. I wanted to have painting, abstract and figurative. I wanted to have multimedia work, sculpture. So I did think about that as well, and very intentionally chose, a wide range of materials. And I think because I thought that would be an interesting way to highlight the small theme, like all the different things that artists do in this small format. So that was how I approached it.
Thank you. And so, having immersed yourself in small works, what are your thoughts about size? So scale is a consideration when an artist creates work. Do you think there's a sensibility around small work, or do you think an artist can, scale up or down at will? What's your thoughts about that?
Well, it's interesting because I do think that the small works are very personal and intimate, and there's a variety of perspectives you can take on small work. I sometimes think artists really like to work big and always want to work big, but I've come to realize that that's not always true, and some artists really do only work small or really cherish that size. And even in the range of works that we have a range of things that are small and gem-like, and other items that seem bigger than their 12 by 12 size. So there is obviously a range within even this size constraint. But One of the things I thought about with the small work show, one of Why Not Art's missions, I'm the head curator of Why Not Art, is we want to create art shows that are very accessible. And I think the small works are very accessible for people who are just beginning to collect or have collected a lot already, because they can get to know an artist without like a full commitment to a huge work. They can fit a small work into their collection. It can be kind of given as a gift, or it's can be easier to connect to a small work. I don't think that's why artists should create it, and they shouldn't be thinking about that as in their making process. But I also think that artists may use the small framework to experiment, to be playful, to try new ideas. So it's interesting to have been brought into that world of all the different reasons why artists might create small work.
Thank you. I want to say that I think artists are always wondering, like, what is the juror looking for? And we took a look, and maybe Susan, you could go back to it for a minute, at Amy Morken's piece that was awarded Juror's Choice. It must have been difficult to narrow it down to a single choice. What would you say draws you to this piece?
Yeah, it was definitely difficult. And I actually kind of late in the game realized I was supposed to do a juror's choice. I didn't know that in the first rounds. I learned it only after we had chosen all the work. So I decided that I really wanted to go back to see the work in person, because that's the other thing, is the work really does look different in person. And I kind of looked at the entire show again. I looked at each piece, and I had many favorites, but I chose Amy's piece because there was something that really spoke to me. Again, it's very personal, but the complex imagery, the use of multimedia, it like challenged me, I guess. And I had a lot of questions about what she was like, what her work was like, whether this was a greater body of work. And so after very careful consideration, I just kind of went with that gut feeling that I thought this would be my juror's choice. So, and I think that that's something all viewers should sort of trust their gut. If you love something, if you are really intrigued and interested by it, I want to break down those barriers for people who think, oh, art collecting is just like the blue chip kind of gallery situation. I think that many people can like accept art into their lives and learn to love it and live with it. And so that's just how I moved with my heart, I guess.
Thank you. So that leads me to asking you about your work as curator. So is the small work show a departure for you? What are you involved with now, and what's coming up for you?
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I do think it was a departure for me. Why Not Art is just coming up on its 2-year anniversary. We've done about 15 shows or interdisciplinary performances in that time. Usually we do a thematic show with like 3 to 4 people. And often we have an interdisciplinary element to that. Like we've done performances where the artwork is about dance and then there's a dance performance, or it's inspired by jazz and there's a jazz performance. And I usually personally know the artists that I'm choosing. So the small work show was very different in the sense that I didn't really know the artist. I just had these images. But I was excited by that because I thought, okay, I'm going to learn about all these artists' work, and I'm going to be connecting with people in a different way. I tried to meet as many artists as I could at the reception. I've been trying to like connect to people over Instagram, which is surprisingly hard, actually. Sort of funny enough. But it was a learning experience to have this sort of flood of art and to choose the works for this show. But it was really gratifying in the end. And then so in 2024, we have some things planned. I don't have any definite dates I can share now, but I would love if people could follow us on Instagram. It's Why Not Art NYC. Our website is whynotart.com. And then we're actually, the big show we had in the fall was called Our Beautiful People. It was a 3-person show that was focused on portraiture. It unfortunately closes tomorrow, but it was at Littlefield, which is a performance venue, and has a gallery attached, and we've done several shows in that venue. But you can still see the work on our website, whynotart.com. And that's the best way to kind of follow what we're going to be doing next.
Thank you so much, Grace.
Thank you.
So if you have questions for Grace, go ahead and put them in the chat or jot them down or keep them in mind, but we're going to move on to our artists. I think we have, yes, Amy Morken is our first artist. And we are already a little bit familiar with this piece. So Amy, congrats on your inclusion in this show, and kudos to you for receiving the Curator's Choice.
Thank you.
This piece is packed with imagery that tumbles out of the picture plane. How do you decide how large or small a piece should be? And is small work your artistic home?
Well, telling you guys earlier, like the 9x12 size is my sweet spot. I love I can make a lot of work at once and have like a few things going. But in my studio, it's a little bit more challenging, but I like to do much bigger work, like, 30 by 40 inches or 38 by 50. And if I get something and start going in a piece like this, and it kind of works with something else, I'll sew them together, which I'm not very good at, but I'll reinforce it on the back so it won't fall apart. But it kind of adds to the multimedia, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, I'm loving the way you mix media here. And I'd love to know all the materials in this piece. And how does that affect your approach to painting in general? Maybe you could tell us a little bit about your approach.
I use watercolor, gouache, oil pastel, pencil, stickers. And in my work, it's often a little bit like, wow, like explosion on the paper. But my materials are meticulous, like super type A. Everything has to be like a perfect rainbow of color. And then I can really kind of let loose with them on the page. So I really hold my materials dear, and I know that's kind of silly, but like I just get in a happy place when I look in and I'm like, oh, yes, ready to go. But when I put something on the page, I have no preconceived idea of what's going to happen.
Interesting. Yeah. And yeah, can you tell us about the collage element?
Sure. The stickers are actually a part of a huge collection of stickers. I was saying, I used to live in South Street Seaport, which is really close to, there's a beautiful like printer there called Bound Printers, and the guy that ran it like just had tons and tons of material and, let me at it basically to collect. And so I use a lot of those, and they're like kind of old fashioned, like New York places and scenery. And then I cut them up and use them as, they can become like clothing or shoes or a bag or, like an arrow, something.
That's so great. I love it. So there's a fascinating kind of narrative starting here. And I think our viewers might be able to interpret that narrative in message in different ways. Can you speak to the subject matter and how that fits into your larger body of work?
I guess, obviously it's figurative, but I moved around a lot when I was little, and having been in one place for a long time here, like I really enjoy kind of seeing exactly what's going on around me. And I notice people and, or conversations or things happening, and little bits of them will fall on to the page. And oftentimes like there will be words or just like an overheard conversation. and it tends to like make me laugh. It's probably not completely transparent, but it like is very, you know, I have a good time doing that, but it is a little bit like over, you know, sensory overload.
I could see that. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And let's move on to our next artist, Clare Burson.
Hello.
Hi, Claire. Claire, I want to congratulate you on your inclusion in this wonderful show. Your sculpture is small but mighty. It has a big presence. Can you speak to your thoughts about small work?
When I think about small, I actually don't necessarily think about my work, which is often in this size. I think of preciousness, and not in terms of fussy preciousness, but something that you treasure. I like the idea of making pieces and being with pieces that I could conceivably embrace and hold, kind of like a kid. Yeah. So. Oh, and also, you know, these small works are windows into something bigger, into vaster worlds.
I love that idea also. So I'm curious about your mixed media. What exactly are the materials in this piece, and are they typical for you? And so is this the scale part of your normal working process?
Yes. I wander sort of between strictly ceramic pieces, pieces that incorporate ceramics, textiles, sometimes found objects, and then I do have a series of pieces that are primarily textile. When I'm making ceramic work, I have the limitation of the kiln, so I can't get too big. And again, I like that I can make things that I can hold without help, and I can move and it won't break my back. This piece actually developed out of an installation that I did about 1.5 years ago. It was an installation of 180 ceramic orbs, and it was called Endings, Beginnings, Forevers Go On. And it was sort of a meditation on the churn of history, the rise and fall of civilizations, change. During the show, if someone bought one of the orbs, they could remove it and then replace it with a shard of one of my broken pieces. And then at the end, we had a closing event, and I invited the people who were there to smash whatever orbs were still there, which was a really special experience. Also a little heartbreaking, but in a good way. You gotta let things go. So then I used the remaining shards after that event to make small, like very small, like that I could hold like this. And then this piece I made this summer out of ceramic work that I broke for the purpose of making work. So these are pieces that, I don't know, some I made as many as 7 years ago. And these are pieces that I didn't think were super successful, or they were experiments. And then I bind them together around another object, either one of my older pieces or something I've found along the way, with embroidery thread and twine and wire and whatever I find.
Beautiful. And just hearing you name those things, they like pull for different illusions, different connections. I'm sure our audience have thoughts about what it evokes for them. Can you talk about what your intention is in relation to like subject or references you want to conjure?
I think a lot about memory, about how we make memory as a group, as communities, how we preserve memories, and that is very much the process I go through in making these pieces. All the shards, you know, they kind of contain those moments when I was making them. And then they're reconfigured and puzzled together in different ways. I think a lot about how destruction can lead to creativity and creation. I think about decay, think about a forest, and like this is almost like a forest with like moss growing underneath dead tree trunks and yeah, repurposing. I hate the idea of, you know, spending so much time on something and then wasting it, throwing it out. So all of those ideas are in here.
That's so wonderful. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you.
And now let's move on to Jocelyn Benford. Jocelyn, congratulations on your inclusion in the annual Small Work Show.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Your lovely piece is particularly tiny, even though all of these are pretty tiny. Can you tell us about your relationship to small work format?
So I have been working small ever since I started. As Amy was saying, I feel very comfortable in 9x12 size. And, you know, I'm starting to try to work bigger, but I'm very comfortable working that size and even a little bit smaller. But that being said, this was kind of a challenge because I have been creating these wall hangings by stringing together some connected panels, series of panels. And I've been doing that with 8x8 for the most part. And I challenged myself to see whether I could come up with a similar, you know, layout, but on a very small scale. So I actually took these pieces, each one of these panels is approximately 3 inches by 3 inches. So I took a 9x12 and I tore it down into smaller pieces and just, you know, it was an experiment and I was actually charmed by how it turned out.
Lovely. Yes, thank you. So could you tell us about your medium? It's interesting that all the artists here today are using mixed media, but in wildly different ways. And I wonder if your approach shifts with different sizes or if your medium dictates the scale at all. And yeah, tell us about your experience with medium.
Yeah, well, I do think that one of the reasons that I leaned into small early on is that the basis of all of my work is watercolor, and watercolor doesn't actually come in large quantities. It's, you know, it comes in these little tiny tubes. You've got little tiny paintbrushes, and so you know, so that sort of lent itself to smaller works. I have, as I said, I start with watercolor, but I layer over that all sorts of mixed media. I have acrylic paint pens, I have crayons, I have water-soluble pencils. I almost always put a little bit of collage in there. And these particular pieces here are then sealed with wax so that they can be hung unframed on the wall, these wall hangings that I'm doing. But I often, you asked whether, you know, how the materials dictate the size. And I feel like when I start a new piece, my first choice is the colors I want to work with. What kind of feel do I want to evoke with this piece? And the second choice is paper choice. And my paper will then dictate my composition, you know, whether it's completely intuitive or whether it's much more thought out. And I really do feel like I have different papers for different types of ways that I work. But these little pieces really require, because they're so small, they really require precision. They really require eliminating anything unnecessary and just distilling it down to the essence. And that's one of the things that I love about working small.
Yeah, so I noticed that I love the delicacy of the way you've handled the materials, and that corresponds with the way that you've handled the subject. Can you speak about your subject matter in this piece and in general?
Sure. So the flowers that you see here are Queen Anne's lace. And I found that I was putting Queen Anne's lace in a lot of my work. I have a whole series of pieces that have Queen Anne's lace in them. And it took me a while to realize that they represent for me going up to visit my dad on his beautiful piece of property in the Finger Lakes of New York State. And, you know, it's this small farm with these beautiful fields, and all along the roadways were wildflowers. And just Queen Anne's lace always drew me. And so when I made that connection that these beautiful lacy flowers that were showing up in my work were really resonant to me of my dad's home and just the concept of home. And then I did a little more sort of soul searching and realized that the motifs and the themes that run through my work, almost all of my work, which is in very different styles, but there's always this feeling of home, sort of the feeling of home, the pursuit of home, the memory of home, the missing of the loss of homes, building new homes, finding myself being at home in my own self. All of that runs through my work. So this is just one of the representations, is these Queen Anne's lace flowers.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And that's the last of my questions. So I wonder if we can open it to the group who has questions for our artists today. You can type in the chat, or you can just unmute and go ahead and ask. Joanne, go ahead and unmute. Wait, you're still muted.
Okay. First of all, thank you. I just to hear about your work was very eye-opening. I enjoyed it very much, and it's great that there's so many different aspects to the three people's work that were shown today. I have a question about waxing over the watercolor. Jocelyn, could you just talk a little bit about that? I'm kind of I don't really understand that process. I'd like to know more.
Sure.
Yeah.
I use a product called Dorland's Wax Medium, which comes in a little pot, and it's kind of the consistency of like shoe polish. And I have found that the watercolor itself is perfectly stable under the wax, but sometimes my other mixed media elements aren't. There are certain pens that will smear with the wax. So I typically do spray on either a fixative or I'm sorry, some sort of fixative. I'll spray on and do one layer of that, and then a couple of layers of the wax, and you rub it on with a soft cloth, and then buff it out so that it's got a nice sort of satiny sheen.
And I assume you do that on the pieces of collage, the gold pieces of collage. Are they put on after, or does the wax go on top of that?
Yeah, almost all of my pieces, the creation of the piece is entirely finished before I do the waxing. So even the collage has a layer of wax over it.
That's great. Thank you so much. Yeah.
And I do front and back so that it's as protected as possible.
That's great. Thank you. I'm going to steal that from you.
Yeah, please.
Hi there, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Well, it's for anybody who would like to answer. This is quite an open question. Well, I was wondering if in making any of these works that you have on exhibit, you were thinking of or referencing or thinking of any artists from the past or contemporary. You know, if you feel like your work is inspired by Yeah, I was curious. Thank you.
Artists, what do you think? Go ahead, Claire.
I'm not necessarily thinking of any artists consciously when I'm making, but I do know that I have many artists in me at all times. I was making a piece, it didn't look like this, the one in this exhibit at all, but I was making a ceramic piece and someone in the studio said, "Oh, that looks like a Louise Bourgeois. She's wearing a costume. It looks like a potato costume." And I looked it up and my piece looked exactly like this potato kind of lumpy costume that she was wearing. She's definitely one of my favorites. Sheila Hicks does a lot of binding, which I think is really cool. And though I wouldn't again say that I'm thinking of her when I'm making these pieces, she's definitely in there.
I would agree. I mean, I sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I just feel like, I have spent a lifetime looking at and appreciating art and nature and humans and colors and all that. And it just sort of, it rattles around in there. And sometimes it comes out deliberately and sometimes it comes out subconsciously. It's hard not there are no absolutely original ideas. It's just what you do with those ideas that makes them yours.
I would say my absolute favorite artist is Alice Neal. And I could just stare at her, anything by her forever. But one thing, when I first saw her work and was kind of learning about her, with her figures, she does this weird, like kind of blue light around the figure, like a blue line. And if I'm working and I get kind of stuck and I'm like not look at it for a minute, but I like maybe a character or figure in my piece, I'll get the blue out and like outline that thing or person or animal or whatever. And then I feel like that's, I've highlighted it enough to like start moving on. Yeah.
You did your little Alice Neal.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Shweta, I believe you're an artist in the show as well. Do you have an answer for that question too?
I like all of these artists that were named. I mean, I love Louise Bourgeois' work, but I actually love classical paintings and I love Renaissance paintings. So I'm always thinking of the lighting, and I am very drawn to that way of representation with light. So yeah, but I also really love portraiture. There are Alice Neal's paintings, and I love Frida Kahlo's work. And I agree that when you see so much over a long period of time, and they all their voices are in your head all the time, and it comes out in the work. So I guess my question was probably very open-ended to say, who are the artists that have inspired you? And yeah, so very exciting.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, there are several artists who are on this. Maybe if anyone wanted to say something about their piece that's in the show or what their experience was being part of this. Or, if any of the questions that Karen asked kind of pricked up some ideas for you, I think people should be able to raise their hands and contribute about their experience in being the show.
And we could share the screen again and pop up your piece. So don't be shy. We'd love to hear from you. We could only manage so many in our talk, but we'd love to hear from all the artists, really.
Well, I guess I should pop in. I'm sort of in the dark. I'm in the show. used to be a part of 440 Gallery, and I actually still am in my heart, and just I feel very connected to the gallery. So I was really pleased to be a part of this small work. So Grace, thank you so much for including me. Sometimes I often wonder if figurative is going to figure in to the small works, and you
I know
chose some-
that I'm like a huge fan of figurative work, so that's,
Mhm.
but I didn't just think, I actually counted through and I didn't overrepresent figurative work. At the end, I started being like, how many abstract, how many mixed media? So that's it.
Well,
But I'm a
we
fan.
talked a little bit about this at the opening, and anyways, I really, of the figuratives that you chose, I love them all, and I was very pleased to be included. So thank you. And I love Richard Diebenkorn, and it's always said that a lot of people remark on that. It looks like a Diebenkorn, and sometimes that's my source. Let's just put it that way. One of them, but he's a strong source for me.
It's a beautiful piece, Janet.
Really is.
Thank you.
Any other artists want to, we can pop up your piece and have a little look.
I just, you can put my piece up, but I just like to commend the whole show is just so well curated in terms of balance and the different medium. And I just, Grace, I just have to say that, you know, we've known each other a short time, but in the short time we've known each other, that you have really, really joined this art community, and you have made so many artists known and appreciated in the last, you know, what is it, 3 years, three or 4 years, 2 years. So it's just amazing. And I was really pleased that you chose one of my pieces. Some of you that know my work know that I work in many different ways. And I think this piece here is a few years old, and I was still doing this urban beat kind of motif in different ways and different materials. And now my work has gone a different way, but I enjoy doing small work as well as large work. But I mostly just wanted to commend you, Grace, because this was a huge undertaking. And the way that you talked about the show in the beginning of the artist talk was really wonderful. So congratulations.
Thank you. Well, Joanne, I feel like you're one of my biggest fans, and you've been so supportive. And I spoke with you at 440 Gallery right when I was starting this a few years, like 2.5 years ago. And you were so generous in your time and talking about the local art scene. I've basically been like a fan of the local Arts Gowanus art scene for the last 20 years since I've lived here. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to connect more specifically to the artists, because I felt that there was so many amazing artists right in this community. And I have a community organizing background. I have a grant development background. I put on events, and I was like, what can I do to like try to bring more of a spotlight to some of the amazing local artists? Of course, this show was a national show. I didn't know where people were from when I was choosing them, and I got to know tons of artists that I'd never seen before. But I really appreciate you saying those kind words, and yeah, I'm
I
happy to
think
be part of the
I think also that I think other people should know is that both you and Michael do a lot of philanthropy work around the arts and arts organizations, and your support physically, financially, in every way has made a big difference in a very short time. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I guess I will talk about my work. I'm thrilled to be in the show. Let's see, we get the image up.
Luckily, they're alphabetical.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, how are you finding these? And this is a moleskin book, and I have a whole series of these moleskin books that I kind of do in between my much larger works. And so now I think I have maybe 5 or 6, maybe even more, of these books that I've completed. And it's always a real challenge to figure out how to show them. And
Mm.
especially to fit it into the 12 by 12 format was, yeah, that was a whole other thing. I spent like a whole afternoon contorting them and moving them and reconfiguring them and trying to figure out how could I get into that 12 by 12 format. But I figured this out, this sort of fan-like shape. This is called worlding. And to me, I mean, it really is like doodling. A lot of the books are very, very spontaneous and not preconceived, just going at it. And when I finished it, it looked a lot like a globe or maps. And so that's the title, was Worlding. And it's watercolor, pen and ink. And again, I often will show it in a whole different format where it's standing up lengthwise. So you're actually seeing more of the imagery.
Yeah, I wanted to say, like, this was one of the pieces that looks so different in person. And I don't know if we have an installation shot of this, but you know, the way it was decided to put it on a platform so you could look down and see it. Because it really is this like textural 3D. Maybe that's it at 18. Yeah. So
Well,
it's really beautiful in the show. And you know, it sort of shows it in a totally different light.
Well, I have to say, I was sitting, so yesterday I was at the gallery. It was my turn to sit at the gallery, and I was sitting at the desk looking at the piece, and from my vantage point, I was kind of low. So I was seeing a lot of the underside of the piece. And I realized that I didn't like the white of the paper from underneath. And so as soon as the show is over, I'm going to paint the whole backside of it black.
Oh,
If
wow.
you ever see it from underneath, it'll be black. So that was very interesting because I somehow had never looked at it from that vantage point.
It's funny that you're saying that, Robin, because I was wondering if in some of your accordion books, if you do both sides, and then you answered that question just now.
Yeah, I mean,
felt about it, yeah.
right. I mean, I don't ordinarily, but now I'm going to have to start thinking about that.
Yeah, it's like a new perspective for you as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
It's a striking piece, Robin. It's
Yeah.
just gorgeous.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Other artists in the show want to say anything?
I was quiet because I had already, spoken once, but if no one else is going, I might take
Let's go to your piece.
Okay, let's see. Let me find it.
I think I
Wait.
saw it there somewhere.
It's B.
Mm-hmm.
Keep going, keep going.
It's my husband's last name. We were joking yesterday. I said if it were to be my maiden name and if I had kept it, I'd be on the last of
There it
every
is.
list.
Oh yeah, I was
Oh, here it
curious
is.
about this. Tell us about this.
So, well, I made this in 2021 when we were in lockdown, and my parents. Well, I'm from India, and my parents still live in Delhi, where I was born. And of course, I couldn't visit with them, and they got COVID, and my dad was hospitalized. And during that time, we would walk very often. We would go walking in the park. I'd go walking in the park with my daughters. I make a lot of pictures in the park, and I collect a lot of things from the park. I have this connection because I live close to Central Park, and it's my sanctuary, really. So we used to walk often in the park, and there were dandelions that were growing at that time. And I think it was May, I think. And my little one she pulled a dandelion out of the ground and she started blowing away at it. And I said, what are you doing? And I said, you're making a wish. She goes, yeah. I said, so what are you wishing for? She said, if I tell you, it won't come true. I said, okay. But then she couldn't contain herself. So she tells me, like, I'm wishing that Nana, because that's how you refer to grandfather in Hindi. She said, I'm wishing that Nana is better quite quickly. And I said, oh, that's so sweet. So we came back home and I said, I think we should make a picture about it. And I find I always think that we're connected with the universe in these fascinating ways where we put out these amazing thoughts into the air and we let them float. And kind of art making is like that too, right? You take something that you feel and you let it out into ether for it to breathe. And I've always been fascinated by the idea that I found that children are born, when they're born, they're so, they're like more, I don't know, complete in a sense, where I feel like as we grow older and we learn, our energy starts to get pulled in all of these other directions, and we start essentially losing this faith that we have in the larger scheme of goodness, in a sense. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I always feel like children ask, when they ask with a big heart, and I think that's the only way that you receive is when you ask without expecting return. So yeah, this is the backstory of the picture is that, but I think that essentially that's also a big part of my work, is just connecting with, making connections with the universe, and thinking about asking and receiving without expectation. And at that time I was looking at a lot of Renaissance work, also the Dutch Golden Era paintings. And so I think that's how the composition was influenced by these things. So that's what it is.
Thank you. So beautiful.
It's very beautiful.
Tell us about how this was made.
Oh, well, my studio has been in my apartment forever. My living room becomes the studio, and I basically reorg my living room when I have to, on the days that I shoot. And so this was taken in my living room / studio. And we collected, like I said, dandelion clocks from the park. I probably have only one light. And it's interesting because Grace asked me this when she said, how did the little dandelion,
It'd be hard to see in the photo, but
yes, because
it looks like there's 50 like little dandelion seeds floating. I think Karen maybe asked me this too when we installed.
Yeah.
And I wondered if they were digitally mastered or how you did it. So
yeah.
And
yeah. So I had my daughter blow, but then I realized that when she blows, they come out in bunches. And so we used her to, in this particular instance, the picture that I finally used, she's blowing, but not too hard. But I have my spouse assisting me on the other side, who's actually standing on a ladder and blowing, and they fall gently down. And the shot is timed in a way that because if you take it too soon, they're in bunches. So yeah, basically there's lots of pictures, but we got this one.
And not like physically mastered.
No.
You physically mastered it versus digitally mastered it,
yes,
which I think is
digitally.
Really awesome part of the story.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
It's really incredible to see in person all the light little, especially with the personal story about what the wishes are about.
Yeah. And I love the little gesture of her holding her nightgown or her dress.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, it is sort of, I mean, it's interesting that you say you're influenced by Renaissance work, because I do see that in your other photos. I mean, some of the people in the show, I do know their work, and I know their background, and I do prefer to have a show that you can have several pieces of one person's work, so you can get a more rich sense of their body of work. So it's sort of interesting. This show is like the antithesis of that, but you know, you're getting a taste of many, many more artists. So I do hope that people come see the show, first of all, but then look up these artists, follow them on Instagram, or find out when their next shows are, because I do think there's this power in the community of finding each other, networking with each other, learning from each other, supporting each other. So maybe that segues into.
I also wanted to say that it's such a beautifully curated show. I really enjoyed it. And the opening night was so busy. So it's hard to get around. I was like, man, I need to see this stuff on another day. But I did get to see a lot of it. And I thought it was so beautifully put together. And it's such a warm feeling being there that night. Thank you so much for having me in it.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really special for me too.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all, and thank you, Grace. I did want to follow up. The conversation is making me think. Sometimes I hear from people saying like, oh, that 440 just is picking their own artists or something like that. But we have two juried shows each year. We have the Small Work Show, which is just like Grace said, it's kind of special because it's all small works and it's not groupings of artists. But then we also have a theme show where, and maybe Grace will get to curate that one time. But that's where we choose a theme, but then we choose a juror to make the selections. So it's never us, but we can enter. But I tell you, I've been rejected a lot.
Me too. Me too.
So just so you know, if you hear other artists wondering about that, it's always an outside juror for even though we're an artist-run gallery. So before we leave, I just want to mention a few things. Jocelyn Benford's having a solo show that opens January, or the opening is going to be January 6th at Sweet Lorraine Gallery, which is at TI Studios in Red Hook. So follow Jocelyn for all, make sure it's that date and come to the opening. And Clare Burson has work up now at Field Projects Gallery. It's going to be up through January 6th. So you could go from one to the other. And Claire, do you want to say anything else about that? Where is that gallery?
Oh, sorry, the dog. The gallery's in Chelsea. It's on West 26th. And the title of it is To Know, oh my gosh, To Know the Earth Through Its Roots, curated by Danielle Johnson. And yeah, it's a great show. It's really another great show. So yeah.
So yeah, go see a little more of Claire's work. And why not all? Grace mentioned that Our Beautiful People, it's the last chance, go tomorrow. And you can even see
Our Beautiful People is at Littlefield, which is at 635 Sackett Street. Tomorrow's the last day. But they do basically that venue. You can catch the works when they're open for shows. They have 2 shows tomorrow. So I think it would be open around noon and probably around like 5 p.m. Or if you DM me, I can make a special appointment. But we also have all the work on our website too at whynotart.org.com. We act like an org, but we're a com.
And the last show I want to mention is James Acevedo's, our next solo artist at 440 Gallery. His show is up January 11th. The opening will be January 13th, and it's called Side Streets. Is that correct, James? Do you want to say anything more about it? paintings by James Acevedo.
Yes, side streets, and there'll be paintings of the city, primarily around where I live, but in a kind of expressionistic, maybe almost fantasy oriented, not like realism, more like my imagination.
Really looking forward to that. And thank you, everybody who came. Thank you, everybody who participated. Thank you, Grace.
Thank you.
Beautiful talk. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays.
Happy
Thanks.
holidays.
You too.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Thank you, Karen, for
Yeah, thanks. Thank
hosting.
you, Karen.
Thank you.
You're
Yes.
welcome.
Great moderating.
Wonderful.
job.
Take care, everyone.
Thank
Ciao.